Former President Donald Trump has just announced that despite hedging and saying that he potentially may skip it, he does plan to go ahead with the debate with Vice President Kamala Harris just 2 weeks from today.
He made this official just moments ago, posting on Truth Social that he has reached an agreement to face off with Harris in their first head-to-head debate on September 10th on ABC. And for more on this, let's bring in CNN's Kristen Holmes. Kristen, tell us what you're learning.
Well, Brianna, what we are told is that this impasse between the Harris and Trump campaign appears to be over. And the big, issue that both sides were having was over whether or not the mics would be muted. In that first debate that Donald Trump did on CNN, they essentially had agreed to muting the mics while the other candidate was talking. Donald Trump's team thought that that worked out well for him. Well, then we heard from Harris's team saying they didn't actually want those mics muted. So this has led to a sort of impasse. They were not happy with it. Donald Trump's team said they wanted the CNN rules. Now they are saying that they have come to an agreement with Kamala Harris and that it's going to be broadcast on ABC Rules. As we know, the rules will be the same as the last CNN debate. This is what Donald Trump is saying, which seemed to work out well for everyone except Joe Biden. And then it says the debate will be, quote, stand up, meaning they won't be seated. The candidates cannot bring notes or, quote, cheat sheets. We've also been given assurance by ABC that this will be a fair and equitable debate and that neither side will be given the questions in advance. I did call a senior advisor after Donald Trump put this out to make sure about this issue on muting the mics. They said, yes, it does mean that the mics will be muted while the other candidate is speaking. So this would be a win for Donald Trump's team here. We have not gotten comment from the Harris side of things, but I did speak, as I said, to that senior advisor who seemed very pleased with the fact that this debate was moving forward and with those same rules that we had had during our debate when it was Donald Trump and President Joe Biden earlier this year.
Kristen Holmes, thank you so much for that. Let's get the perspective from the Harris camp with CNN's Eva McKend. Eva, the Harris team tried to box Trump in with having the mics unmuted. They even put out ads insinuating that he was too chicken to debate her. What are you hearing now?
Boris, they did. It seemed like the strategy was to mock him and try to get under his skin, as they often have, to push them to the terms that they wanted. We're still waiting to hear if this means the mics will in fact be unmuted for the duration of the debate like the Harris camp requested. But ultimately, Harris's allies, they're telling me that they're eager for this matchup because in their view, it will show a stark contrast. They are banking on Trump interjecting, ranting, raving, airing grievances. We know that in his own words, in his own description, he's saying that he doesn't have to prepare much for this, that he can sort of just be his natural self. We, of course, know he is preparing and he does sort of downplay this. But what we have seen from the vice president, especially over these last 5 weeks, is that she prepares intensely. We know that she is preparing intensely for this debate. And ultimately, she's a disciplined messenger and her activities are tightly choreographed. So if you have that as a contrast up on that stage against the former president, that is something that they're really relying on will work out in their favor. But we're still waiting to hear back from them on this whole muted mics issue.
All right, Eva, we'll look forward to that. Thank you. Let's talk about this now with our political experts. We have former special assistant to President George W. Bush, Scott Jennings, former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania. He's also a senior advisor with Our Republican Legacy. And Jamal Simmons is back with us, a former comms director for Vice President Harris. Scott, to you first, because the campaign for Trump had been clear. They wanted the mics muted like we saw in the initial debate with Biden. Then you heard Trump on the campaign trail saying it didn't really matter. I guess it did matter, and I wonder what your reaction is to this news, Trump saying that the mics will be muted.
Well, I think having a debate is good for Trump because if he doesn't pin Kamala Harris down on her record and what she's done as vice president and her previous statements when she ran for president before, I don't think anyone else is going to do it for him. So he needs this debate. So from a Republican's perspective, it's good that it's happening. The CNN rules worked for him before. It seemed to be fine. And so if this is the agreement and this is how they got it done, then good for Team Trump. I've never been all that interested in the minutia of the rules. I just wanted to make sure they had a debate because I think the American people deserve to see one. And so if we're going to have that on the 10th, that's a good thing.
Charlie, from your view, who stands to benefit most from the microphones being muted while the opponent is speaking?
Well, I kind of agree with Scott. The fact they're having the debate is important. Rules are less significant. But I think Trump actually benefits from having the mics muted because he's prone to outbursts. And with the mics off, you're less likely to hear them. It's one way to keep him somewhat controlled. So I think that's a victory for Trump that they've muted those mics. Probably better for him. I see why Harris wanted the mics on. She thought she could probably trigger Trump to say something pretty outrageous and pick it up on the mic. So that's a victory for the Trump team.
Yeah, she wants to show that he has an impulse control problem. And Jamal, I wonder what you think about this news when it comes to mics.
Well, first of all, we're taking Donald Trump's word for it. So I'm going to just take that with a grain of salt. But let's assume that it's true. It might just be true that the Harris campaign was trolling Trump, looking for a way to get under his skin every day. And it does seem like if you pay attention to some of the social media that's out there, that they are really doing a very good job at just needling him every single day. They're playing a lot of offense on this campaign. And that's the kind of thing that Democrats want to see. And it's the kind of thing that I think ultimately hurts Trump. Look, Trump right now is 0 for 1 when it comes to debates, right? Like he may think that he won that debate, but it might be that he actually lost the war because of that debate. Because after that debate, Joe Biden left. And when Joe Biden left, he ended up with Kamala Harris. So he should be careful.
0 for 1. Jamal, my brother and colleague. 0 for 1. He literally ran a man who'd been in politics for 52 years out of his chosen profession over a debate. I mean, look, I understand what you're arguing, that you all traded in for a better candidate, but Trump won the debate. He is not 0 for 1. Are you saying he actually did so well that he did badly?
But this is exactly the problem with campaigns. Very often people are focused on the minutia of what it means in this tack or that tack. But the question is, are you winning the fundamental argument? And for right now, Donald Trump may have tactically won the debate, but strategically, it may have cost him the entire election because he ended up with a much better candidate than the one he was aiming for. And he's probably now a couple of points behind.
Charlie, I'm curious from your perspective because Scott is presenting in a certain way. Obviously, Jamal is making the argument that Trump may have won the battle, but he lost the war. But this idea that Trump won the last debate based on his own answers, based on his own responses, how much do you think his success had to do with what happened to Joe Biden rather than his own ability to stay on message and to drive points home to the American people?
Well, at the time, I thought that Trump did not lose the debate. I thought Joe Biden lost the debate. I don't know that Trump actually won it. I mean, it's not like he made a whole lot of great points. He got caught in a lot of lies and false statements. So he didn't do himself any damage. He looked reasonably controlled, but I wouldn't go so far as to say Trump won. I'd say that Biden just lost miserably because he demonstrated to the public that he did not seem to be fit and was incapable of serving another 4 years fully. I think that was the real issue. So I wouldn't go so far as to say Trump won.
Very interesting point. Jamal, interview with Harris coming up at some point here soon, we presume. Talk to us a little bit about the stakes here when we find out who she's interviewing with, what that's going to signify.
Well, the campaign is probably sorting through a lot of different questions, right? First of all, you do an interview not because they would love to make Boris and Brianna happy. They do an interview because they want to move forward some part of the campaign agenda, right? They've got something to advance. And so the question is, what voters are they trying to talk to, and what outlet are those voters paying attention to? So what you may see is maybe there's a mix. Maybe there's local news. Maybe there's national news. Maybe there's radio and print mixed into this. So we don't exactly know how it is they're going to come up with this because they haven't told us yet. But I got to say, when you're doing this and you're thinking about this, you're not just thinking about doing an interview for interview's sake. You're doing it because you're trying to accomplish a strategic purpose, and the campaign just hasn't had a reason, a purpose to do an interview to this point. I would argue it's time for them to do something because the American public needs to hear from the candidate on some of these issues, and I think we're going to see that based on what Vice President Harris said, which is that they're going to do something by the end of the month.
Scott, what would you counsel if you were counseling Kamala Harris? How would you suggest that she approach an interview in which she's going to be asked about her positions morphing over time?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, look at the amount of hand-wringing going on in the Harris campaign over one simple decision. They cannot figure out how to, where to, when to, and who to do an interview with. One simple decision. We want to put her in charge of the country and make all kinds of complex decisions. They can't even decide when and how to do an interview. And so that concerns me. If I were counseling them, I would say, pick somebody and go in and be prepared to face the discrepancies in your record. You've got all these anonymous press statements now saying you don't support any of the stuff you used to support. You're going to have to tackle it head on. That's number one. Number two, she's going to have to say Joe Biden made some mistakes. I mean, she can't run on Biden's record. She can't run on his plan. She's going to have to show up and say, he did this, this, and this. I disagreed, but he's number one. I'm number two. I've learned from the experience. If she's not willing to do that, she's going to wear Biden. It's going to make it hard to win. Because if she isn't willing to separate on a specific policy issue or two or a decision, Trump's going to have her for the rest of the fall basically as a continuation of the Biden agenda. So those are my two pieces of advice.